Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the full moon day of April. It was the day the Buddha, Guru, Sakyamuni appeared in this world. 2,600 years ago, this planet welcomed the Buddha, Guru. This year is the first year I am at the youth center for Buddha's birthday. Because of the pandemic, there was not a single person besides me, Buddhist monk Thich Thong Lai, and Vice Abbot Thuy Minh. Every year at this time, a lot of Buddhist followers come to pay tribute. The female Buddhist followers would be in charge of arranging the flowers, preparing food for the short-term monkhood retreats. The male Buddhist followers come here to cut the grass and remove rubbish with Buddhist monks Thich Thong Lai. But this year is different. For about a month now, I roll up my sleeves and did all the maintenance. Now, I want to talk about the subject that all the temples celebrate, Buddha's birthday. What is the purpose of celebrating Buddha's birthday? The purpose of celebrating Buddha's birthday is to help us remember Buddha, Sakyamuni, and his purpose of appearing in this world. Try to imagine that without Sakyamuni Buddha, all beings on this planet Earth would not know the things that cause suffering to each other. Now, let's ask ourselves why this year all the temples in the world and the United States are celebrating Buddha's birthday in seclusion, besides some monks who take permanent residence at the temple. Because of the orders from the United States during the pandemic, we cannot gather a large number of people. And even Master Thong Lai has many disciples who sometimes want to come to pay tribute and work for merit. But I do not dare to accept. Even though they volunteer, but if they contact something, I would feel responsible. Therefore, I do the maintenance alone. Because without doing so by the end of this pandemic, next year, all the electricity and water systems of this youth center will be damaged. Now, let's get back to today. I don't celebrate Buddha's birthday, but I utilize this moment to talk to all the Vietnamese compatriots and my disciples. We should look at the appearance of Buddha in this world. What was he doing? And what was his first sentence after he took 7 steps right after he was born to his mother? The Sakyamuni Buddha was able to say this: "In the heavens above and earth beneath, I alone am the honored one. All beings have the Buddha nature." That is, the Buddha realized that all human beings, from saints to mortals, all have Buddha nature. The Buddha was Prince Siddhartha, son of Siddhartha. He had a royal life, and he knew nothing about the lives of people whom were suffering outside Kiplavastu. King Siddhartha believed in the divination words of Brahmaka priests, especially the Asista priests, that the Buddha had 32 divine marks and 80 beautiful signs. If the Buddha stayed as a prince, one day he were to become the Kavatrati Raja, or the emperor of this planet. But if he became a monk, he were to become the awakened one. He would bring happiness to mankind. Fearing the fortune-telling words of Asita and Brahma priests, Singh Hitanan surrounded the Buddha with all the worldly desires day and night. He built the winter palace, the summer palace, the autumn palace, and spring palace for the Buddha to indulge himself all 4 seasons of the year. The Buddha's life was fulfilled with the 5 desires. He possessed 3 places and 6 divisions. One day, the crown prince asked his personal servant, Channa, to escort him outside of the Kipsatu to observe the lives of the outside people. As you know, this was the first time he went outside. They went through the eastern gates for a while, and the Buddha saw an old man dressed in ragged clothes. He asked his servant, Channa, why the old man's face was wrinkled and wore rag clothes. Why didn't he see a man like this in the palace? Who was that person? And why did he have such an ugly old appearance, with hunchback, blurry eyes, gray hair, trembling hands and feet? The 4-horse coachman answered, Your Highness, this is an old man. The Buddha asked, Why didn't we see men like this in the palace? Channa responded, Because all the people you met were blessed. They were ministers. They were concubines. They were queens. They were Wang Fi. So they were very happy. And this is a beggar without children, and he is old. Then Prince Satratra asked, So will I be old? Channa replied, Rather a king or a commander, whether king or a beggar. No one could avoid the cycle of life, which is birth, old age, sickness, and death. When Prince Satratra heard that he would grow old, he told his servants that he did not want to go any further and returned to the palace. The next day he asked his concubines why they were old men outside the palace, and he did not feel happy at all. King Situran said, Because yesterday the prince went to the east and met the old people. So the king ordered no elderly people allowed to appear on the journey of Prince Situra. And yesterday the crown prince went to the east side of Kipvasa. Today he changed direction and headed to the west gate. After going a bit further, he saw a sick person laying on the side of the road. So the prince asked why this person was on the side of the road without home. Who was this person? Why did he suffer like this? At that time, his servant, Channa, was coaching the 4-horse wagon. Channa said that this was a sick person. He was old and homeless, so he was laying on the edge of the road as he's waiting for death. The crown prince sadly said that he did not want to go any more and returned to the royal palace. The next day, King Situhan banned the elderly and sick from appearing in the area around Kiplasatu. The prince went to the east to meet the elderly and went to the west to meet the sick. This time the king ordered very carefully that no one be allowed to gather near the prince's journey. The prince went for a while and saw a dead person lying on the road. He wondered why the person lay motionless, covered with fleas, and smelled rotten. Then the servant Channa said that this is a dead man. The prince asked if he would die as well. Channa responded this: His Highness, everyone must die. The rich people die in castles, the prince died in the castle, and the beggars dies on the side of the road or the bazaar. The crown prince said that he did not want to go any further and wished to return to the palace. He saw the scenery of the east, the scenery of the west, and the south was to meet the dead. The only one gate was to the north. The king Sutan ordered absolutely not to let any elderly, sick person, or dead corpse appear on the path of the crown prince on the next day. Only the Brahmins, priests, and the rich were too allowed to appear on the road. And for the first time, the prince saw a Brahmin monk who wore a cassock and walked on the road with a calm attitude and was very relaxed. The Brahmin monk was in his 40s. Channa asked the prince if he knew who that man was. The prince admitted that he did not know. However, the man dressed in a strange outfit, and his way of walking was very gentle. The prince asked who that person was, and why was he different from the 3 people he met at the 3 previous gates of the city. The coachman Channa said that he was a Brahmin monk who was the highest class of Indian society. The status of this man was even higher than the level royal castle, which was the king. The prince stopped the wagon and started a conversation with a Brahmin monk. He asked, "Would a Brahmin monk have a family?" The Brahmin monk said, "I am a clergyman of Brahmin. According to the Vedic scriptures, a Brahmin monk entered monastery life to earn all the divination astronomy and all the medicine until he was 40 years old. And the Brahmin clergy went on a vegetarian diet. By the age of 40, I will practice and will return home. I will get married and have children. And I will stir my child on the road to become a Brahmin monk." As you know, clergies on the Brahminical side are also vegetarian. The Buddha asked where the Brahmin monk goes after his death, and he said that he would also get old, get sick, and die. However, when he dies, he will go to the Brahma realm. This realm is very happy. Since Siddhartha asked if it is possible for him to be a Brahmin clergy, the Brahmin monk said it is possible as long as the prince is a royal caste and astrocity. However, King Sutan did not agree to let the prince enter the monkhood because he was the only son who, according to Brahmin law, had to return to get married when he was 40 years old to pass on the bloodline. When the Buddha met the Brahmin monk at the northern gate, there was no Buddhism at that time, so the prince went home. He sought to escape to Kablevska after he returned to meet the king. The prince asked the king to let him follow the Brahmin clergies so that he could become a monk because he did not want to be an emperor. And the Siddhartha lamented that the prince was the only son. Only the prince could rule the kingdom after the king died. And this kingdom of Kablevska depends on the prince's moral behaviors. The prince would bring happiness to the people of Kablevska. The king disagreed, and at that moment he knew the prince consciously wanted to practice Brahmanism so that after his death he could return to the Brahma realm The king ordered the musketeers to guard the royal palace very well. One night, around 3 to 4 a.m., after a party with his concubines, the crown prince, for the first time, saw all the concubines were tired and their clothes were falling apart. They lay in the palace where they slept, and the impure substances came out of their mouths. He saw the lipstick and makeup fading. He realized the concubines were beautiful earlier because of their makeup. After spending time to eat, drink, dance, and sing all night, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning is the hour that reveals all the ugliness that were covered by makeup. The prince called his servant, Chanana, who was often at the side of the Buddha before he entered the monkhood as his personal bodyguard, and told him to get his stallion horse ready. And the prince set out without knowing where to go. He passed over the city walls. The walls were very high and guarded securely by the king's guards. At that time, the 4 heavenly kings were wishing to help the prince enter the monkhood. So the 4 heavenly kings lift up 4 legs of the horse to ride over the Kavasaval's walls to escape the city. They rode the horse for a while until reaching the Anoma River. Once again, the 4 heavenly kings help the stallion jump across the Anoma River. They further advance into the darkness. Finally, the prince decided to stop the horse and give up all his jewels to Chanana and say goodbye. He told Chanana that he would not return to the palace until the day he found a way to end Samsara. Chanana cried and begged the prince to come back to the palace, but the prince remained unchanged. He stripped off all his jewelries and gave them to Anand except his royal clothes. The prince's beautiful suit was carefully decorated with diamonds. As he walked further into the night, he saw a hunter come out from the forest. The prince asked the hunter to trade clothes. The hunter was very happy. The Buddha, at the time, still played the role of the crown prince. He told the hunter to use his royal clothes to exchange for rice and live a prosperous life. The Buddha also borrowed the hunter's knife to cut his hair and change his clothes and began his journey. Our grandparents and parents were sick. We were also sick and meet the dead, especially the disciples of the Tham Nguyen temple system of the Untitled village, guided by Master Thich Thong Lai. Some of us enter the coffin and face our death. We are Buddhist followers and we practice Buddhism every day. Every year and every Buddha's birthday, we practice Buddhism. Being a Buddhist follower, we know that we will die. We know that we will get sick and get old. The majority of my disciples in the Amata village and the old female disciples who are not living in the village have at least 1 to 3 conditions and take 1 to 3 medicines daily. The Buddha saw an old person and he realized that he would get sick and the rich would also get old. He saw a sick person and he understood the rich would get sick as well as royal members. He saw a corpse and he realized the rich would also die. From that, he gave up everything, but we didn't. When will we be able to give up everything? This year, Buddha's birthday is the Buddha's birthday during the greatest tribulation in the world. You can see well that all the money and everything we possess, but as soon as the impermanence comes, we cannot bring anything but good karma and evil karma. The story of Sakyamuni Buddha's life are many, and I have already taught them before. Everyone knows and everyone remembers every year on Buddha's birthday, on the 15th day of the 4th month, we dress cleanly and go to the temple. We do the Buddha bathing ceremony, and we make offering to the 3 Buddhist jewels. All of that is good, and we have repeated it many times. However, how many people have awakened? How many have let go of all the suffering in this world? The Buddhists first followed the Burman priest to practice. He practiced meditation faithfully to reach the first level of meditation. He then attained the 2nd jhana and 3rd jhana level. He talked to the Brahmin priest who reached the highest level as the 4th jhana, or the non-no-thought realm. The Buddha asked the priest if he was free from the Samsara or not. The priest admitted that after living in heaven for millions of years until his blessings ceased, he would have to return to Samsara. The Buddha left these priests to find his own path. During his monastic life as a Brahmin clergy, he practiced along with the 5 brothers, Kanu Dina, 3 relatives from his mother's side, and 3 relatives from his father's side. These people were ordered by the king Sahudan to follow the Buddha. The Buddha practiced asceticism for the next 6 years. He ate 1 time a day and finally ate grain of rice or a sesame seed or a bean a day. His body and his strength were consumed. The Buddha was too weak to live on. Eventually one day, while he meditated to practice the ascetic method, a troupe passed. The musician was calibrating the instrument string extremely high and asked if the singer could sing or not. The singer said that the strings were too high and he could not sing. The musician lowered the string and asked the singer if he could sing. The singer said the strings were too slack, very low, and hard to listen to. Finally, the musician tuned his instrument, not so high nor low. He again asked the singer in the troupe if he can perform now, that he tuned his instrument, not to taunt nor slack. The singer sang a very nice piece of music from which the Buddha was startled by enlightenment. The prince in the palace lived extremely wealthy. He was surrounded with servants and possessed multiple palaces. He was immersed in luxurious pleasures of the world, but it was like a stretched string of the instrument. 6 years he lived in the forest and abandoned his parents, wife, and his son. He left his throne and palaces like a slack string of an instrument. He was exhausted before he could find the way to end Samsara. After the Buddha decided to follow the path of the mid-dharma, for the first 6 times in 6 years of asceticism, he accepted an offering from a cow-herd girl. She offered a bowl of milk to the Buddha. After the Buddha received her offering, he regained his strength and started his deep meditation under the Bodhi tree for 49 days. He followed the path that caused the suffering. It is known as the 4 Noble Truths. So, how can we end our suffering? How can we obtain enlightenment to end Samsara. The Four Noble Truths are: life consists entirely of suffering. Suffering has causes. The causes of suffering can be extinguished, and there exists a way to extinguish the cause. There are many causes that create suffering in the world, but in summary, the Buddha saw clearly that suffering is mainly caused by greed. You can see clearly the greed in life. Before the coronavirus pandemic, Bill Gates was a saint. He was as rich as he could be. He teamed up with Chinese chemists making vaccines and test them in babies in undeveloped countries like in Africa, India, and Bangladesh. With the world's most valuable property, he is still greedy. From this, you can see clearly all these miseries are caused by greed. When there is greed, we will lose our wisdom. When we lose our benefits, we will get greedy. And if there is greed and aversion, there will be misery. So our suffering is caused by us. Our greatest enemy is ourselves. At the beginning, when I studied Dharma, the Venerable taught me the greatest enemy of my life is myself. At that time, I did not agree. Now I ask those who are married to a patriarchal gamble husband, or a wife-beater husband, or an unfaithful husband. They blame the fatherly heavens and Mother Earth, but they should blame themselves, because they were the one who chose who they wanted to marry. At that time, his words were music to your ears, and his dressing suited your style, and he pleased your eyes, and his voice softly matched your will. Therefore, your greatest enemy is you. Now a certain guy gets married to an unsatisfied wife. He laments the gods, Buddha, and his parents. I am sorry, but it was him who brought his misery. He was the one who helped himself get married and made him miserable with this woman. So the greatest enemy to lead him into choosing a person was himself and no one else. When we have seen all the things that put us in a good or bad situation, we're by ourselves, but no one else. Prior to the Buddha appeared, every cause was created by God. If the gods wants you to be happy and rich, then you will be happy and rich. If the God wants you to be poor and suffering, you will then be poor and suffer. The Buddha did not accept that. He looked clearly in the same family, the same language, the same bloodline with DNA origin, but everyone's money in the bank is not the same. All were born by the same parents, but the faces of their children are completely different. So the Buddha did not accept the fate of one man entrusted by someone else. He said all suffering or happiness is in your own hands and not anyone else. As a Buddhist follower, you have to assert that fact. The Buddha appears in this world to identify all suffering caused by ourselves. I now analyze many of us who think that having money is happiness. Marrying a beautiful wife is happiness. Having assets is happiness. Having fame is happiness. But we have to reconsider these happiness. If you give a millionaire your old car worth about $1,000, they will be angry. Will they be happy? But if that old car is given to someone who doesn't have a car, or a poor beggar. It is happiness. One's person happiness that is given to other is not necessarily happiness. But now there are people who are suffering because of their wives. They are suffering because their husbands and their children. They are working on legal documents to get divorce. They are dividing their properties. They wait for the marriage contract to be decided by the court. They then said, "Oh my God, I am single and I am so happy." There were many people who meet me and were also my disciples and told me that they are very happy because they have been divorced. They finally have escaped from the prison of marriage. The happiness of the man who gets married to an unsatisfactory wife then has to divide assets and pay child support. Now he finished signing the court orders and split up the assets. He is happy because he is free. On the contrary, there are people who are living freely. They have everything, but they don't see it. They dream and they ask this person and that person to help them find misery. So one person's happiness is another person's misery. One's discarded thing is another's happiness. So ladies and gentlemen, all those things that the Buddha calls crazy and delusion, the world's delusion, I will not preach like the Venerable Thich Thong Lai. My idea about delusion is some thought that we evaluate on a person or a thing or a life that is not correct. For example, when we see that person who lives in a mountain's house, we become greedy. We say, "Oh wow, you have a house on a mountain worth a few $1,000,000, while I only have the house in this downtown area." It is not very safe because of the low-income people. At the end, you turn your dream into reality. You try very hard to sell your 40-year-old house in the downtown area to get $400,000. Using this as a down payment, you then buy a $1 million home because you think the $1 million home will give you happiness. On the contrary, once you have a $1 million home, you still don't find happiness. You now have to pay more home insurance, higher property tax, work harder, and more misery. Therefore, it was an unrealistic thought. The thought you think about something and assume that it's happiness, but when you face the truth, it is not happiness at all. So when you get bored of wearing an old shirt and you throw it away, but for people without clothes, the old shirt would make them happy. However, happiness in this world is all short-lived, and nothing is ever long-lasting. Look at the toddler with toys. You buy new toys for them. They will be happy, but forget about a toy within the very same day. We then say these kids get bored quickly, but try to ask ourselves to see if we are like them. We are just like them. We were in love when we were young. We dreamed that marriage would give us happiness, but after years of living together, we realized it was filled with unhappiness. We then divorce and divide the assets. Some tried again by stepping another step, but still don't find happiness. These are the things that were left behind by the Buddha. If you look carefully, when the Buddha was still alive, his disciples were happy. In the present day, the Buddhist monk and nuns cannot live on the streets nor the market. They cannot live in places like today. and tomorrow in a cemetery because of the United States and Australian laws. So the suffering must be seen for all temples and all the monkhood events starts in the kitchen. It is in the same in any individual house. If the roots of misery is from the kitchen, you should ask the housewives. The husband works in the company for 8 hours a day. He works as an engineer, a doctor, or an assembly worker, but they are happier than their wife at home. Think about it. A family with 4 mouths to feed, how long does the wife have to stand in the kitchen? How many times does she have to go to the market? How many times does she have to wash the dishes? This is not counting other things such as vacuuming, washing clothes, and tidying up the house. So you can see the same thing happens in all the temples as well. But it is the life of the United States, and we cannot hide from it. During this Buddha's birthday season, I sat and I talked to Master Thich Thong Lai that this year we have no Buddhist followers to help me. The thing is, we don't want them to come up here because if they come here and they get sick, then their families will be affected as well. And I see very clearly because of this pandemic, people like him are happy because every year Master Thich Thong Lai became the head chef of the kitchen. He had to go to the market to buy food and supplies to cook. If there was no pandemic, I have to stand at 2 to 3 events. The event for the introduction of recitating Buddha Hall in Fresno, the inauguration event of the Buddhist temple of the Thirfara Buddhists in Colorado, and the April 30th memorial event in Emitat Village in Texas in tribulation to the fallen heroes because of the protecting the nation. To me, it has been hundreds and thousands of years to celebrate and welcome to the Buddha. But welcoming and bathing Buddha is not enough. Welcoming him to find out why the Buddha appeared in this world. For a few thousand years, the Buddha was not suffering, but we have misery. Because the Buddha could not let everything go, he only had 3 robes, and he allowed his disciples to have 3 robes, a bowl, and a meditation mat. Ladies and gentlemen, the Buddha and his Sangha went to many countries barefoot and slept under the tree. The monks were not allowed to sleep on the same tree for more than 3 consecutive nights, because sleeping till the 4th day, then he or she would not start to make a hut to occupy. They would think that the tree belonged to them. So the Buddha walked everywhere, all over 16 Indian countries. His life was not miserable. And now let me ask you something. You arrived in this country with 1 bag. As time goes on, we continue to build our career, marriage, and have children. Every time you move from one city to another, you have to rent a U-Haul truck. You have to move the tables and chairs. You have to suffer to pack your things. If you walk inside a house, you can see what the person is miserable for. They suffer because they have so many clothes, especially women. They have to buy brand name clothes, but have not even worn them. They don't even wear these clothes because these clothes no longer fit their style. So the clothes they leave untouched. You can see your greed through the moving. The greed filled from all the moving boxes. So that is how you can conclude if a person has more or less suffering, by going inside their homes, by evaluating their greed. The simpler he lives, the less miserable he is. The fancier he lives, and clinging to the outworld appearance, the more miserable he is. A person who has one car suffers according to one's car. The person who has 3 cars suffers according to 3 cars. So all of these miseries are due to our greed. It is never stopping and adds up with more misery. When you get 2, you will ask for 3. When you get 3, you will ask for 10 and for 11 until you cannot then get it. Then we will complain to the fathers and blame Mother Earth. Please know that for me. There are people who buy and use very simple kitchen cabinets. They live a simple way, and they will be less suffering. One day they will go to visit people, new homes, and they will return home. They strip off their old cabinets to put in new ones. To afford the new cabins, they will have to go to work to earn more money. So I think all the suffering in this world is because most Buddhist disciples don't see clearly. If we know and stop, then we are free from all misery. That is, we know enough is enough, then we will end our suffering. If we don't know enough is enough, we cannot attend Buddha's birthday until the day we die. We are still miserable. Some of the Buddhist disciples were the high ministries. One day, some of them were smiling in enlightenment while meditating. Some Buddhist followers said these ministers were living in this forest and probably imagined their wives in the palace and remembering the entertainment centers. Therefore, they were laughing while meditating. The Buddha invited these monks to ask what they saw in their meditation that made them laugh happily. The Buddha asked these monks to tell because the others said that Bhikkhu was meditating, laughed happily like they were impure. That monk was Prime Minister. He said that he laughed because he realized how stupid he was in the past, being a Prime Minister, but he was very miserable. He was afraid of being assassinated. When he worked in the palace, he had to flatter to the king for his promotion. In addition to his advancement, he also wanted his wife and his children to have his official position. He wanted children to continue to follow his path. And now that he followed the Buddha, his possession had nothing but 3 robes, a mat, a seating cushion, and a bowl to beg for food. He lived freely without making enemies. He begged people for food to live. He ate whatever people offered. Once upon a time, when he wanted to eat, it required a whole kitchen committee, including famous chefs and even hundreds of people, to serve him dozens of dishes. Now he just ate whatever people offered him in his bowl. No wife, no children, no relatives, but he felt very happy. He laughed because he thought back to the time when he was a Prime Minister, smiling, gaining the reputation of being the Prime Minister, but never being happy and peaceful. So this Buddhist birthday season is the Buddha's birthday during the global suffering from the viral disaster. The United States has more than 70,000 people died and over 1 million people are infected. There are many people suffering from the coronavirus, Wuhan in Vietnam. The whole world faces death, even from a country with a strong economy like the United States. There are people who have laminated to me that unemployment is not enough to pay rent, to pay for lease, and their business would be bankrupt by September. You do not have to be sad. Take this opportunity to practice Buddhism and to let go. We suffer because of non-stop greed. We will be happy if we know how to stop. There's no showering ceremony for this Buddhist birthday. I am Buddhist monk Thich Thong Lai, walking by myself in the woods at the youth center to cut grass and do maintenance. But I am sending a message to my disciples everywhere. My fellow disciples, please look in the kitchen and then look back to the Buddha. Why didn't the Buddha spend a lot of time in the kitchen? But he took time to open the knowledge of his disciples. When the Buddha was still alive, the monks also did not spend a lot of time eating and sleeping. We have it all, but are more miserable than when we were poor. Poverty is not necessarily miserable. Richness is not necessarily happiness. Happiness is when we can stop our greed and block our desire. If we take the Buddha as a standard, there is no one who is lacking than the Buddha. Take the Buddha's standard. He walks everywhere. Now there is no Buddhist disciples who walk, especially in the United States and in Vietnam. Because of his standards, we realize that we are much richer than the Buddha. We live in a materialized world. We were born in a country where there are more laws and civilization than in Buddha's time in India. The Buddha was happy. And why aren't we happy? It is because we don't see clearly and we don't let go. This world will turn into a paradise of bliss when all the sons of Buddha let go of greed, know enough, and have enough wisdom. No greed is equal to reciting 1,000 sets of sutras. In this season, we cannot go to the temple to bathe the Buddha, but we can bathe our mothers, fathers, and people who are grateful to us. The merit of bathing these people is more than bathing the Sikmuni Buddha. To me, everywhere is ashrams and temples. Everywhere is a place to practice Buddhism. This year's pandemic of the coronavirus, Wuhan, helped us to wake up and to realize that life is impermanent. We have the property, education, occupational position, restaurants, and nail salons. With some changes, all these things are taken away by impermanence. So knowledge is the treasure that a Buddhist disciple must have. Knowledge is ambition. That's why the Buddha appears in this world. Today is Buddha's birthday, on the full moon day of April. I am Buddhist monk Thich Thong Lai. Today is Buddha's birthday, on the full moon day of April. I am Buddhist monk Thich Thong Lai, and I would send a few words to remind my disciples who practice Buddhism religiously and know Buddhist sutras very well, but they seldom apply their Buddhist knowledge in life. A person who knows enough is enough, then he will be happy regardless of what situation he faces. If he doesn't know enough is enough, even living in the United States, Australia, or Europe, he will still see deprivation. He still will complain to gods and blame on earth. This Buddha's birthday doesn't have the bathing ceremony, nor disciples, just grass and flowers at the youth center. But I want to send out a message that the Buddha found happiness, not from being a king, nor from hoarding wealth assets, but he found happiness because he knows how to let things go and be content with the present. He also found happiness in his current lifetime, not to wait for rebirth into a different realm. In this world, we really need wisdom and need to know how to let things go. Please take a moment to look back to see how much leftover is in your kitchen. How many suits do you have in your wardrobe? Any Buddhist disciples who have more than 3 sets of clothes are considered greedy. Whoever lives in the United States that has more than 1 car is considered greedy. Whoever has money in their bank, house to live in, and children who are enrolled in the United States University and still lament because this person is not content with the present. In his mind, the grass is always greener on the other side. There is no Buddha bathing ceremony, no chanting, flowers, and fruits. But I am telling the life of the Buddha to remind my disciples that we are suffering because we have too much greed. We suffer because we do not know enough is enough. And we must remember, temples are not the only place where we can practice Buddhism. We are angry because the opinions of others are not the same as ours. The merits of stopping our anger equals to the merits of performing 100 bathing ceremonies for the Buddha. The merits of bathing the Buddha statue in plains, stone, bronze, or cement does not equal to the merit of giving bathe or bath to our parents. So the message of Buddha's birthday this year is, why are we still suffering? We should look back at Buddha. He came to this world to end suffering. Why was he so naive? Why didn't he stay in the palace with his father, King Sutahan, whom had enormous treasure? King Sutahan could build a very large temple for the Buddha to practice Dharma. But instead, Buddha chose to live outside on the streets and sleep under a tree. The truth is, living in the palace under the protection of his father and muskrats, many other kings of different countries were ready to send their troops to invade the land of King Sutahan. Take a look at Xi Jinping. Because of his greed, he wants all the world to be under his control. You can see clearly all the suffering in this world are the result of greediness. When greed cannot be satisfied, then stupidity will surface, and then follow foolishness. All of my disciples, if you are lamenting, you should rethink again. Check to see if you have more than 3 pairs of clothes. Check in your kitchen if you have more than a cup or a bowl. If you do, then you are richer than the Buddha. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look into your shoe rack, and if you have more than 1 pair of shoes, then you are richer than the Buddha. Well, anyone who has a bicycle is still richer than the Buddha Guru. Therefore, knowing enough is the key to happiness. And if you don't know when enough is enough, then being a king or a queen of the world, or number 1 like billionaire Bill Gates, you will still always live in misery. You still want to make more money while old age and death are approaching. After death, one cannot bring anything with him. The greatest possession that you can bring with you to death is wisdom. What is the difference between wisdom and intelligence? Intelligence is the learning in this world to create a nice house, fancy cars, beautiful wife, and cute children. These are the things that brings us misery, not happiness. While wisdom is something that is within you, that opens you up with Buddha's guidance and instructions, so that you can let go of all things that makes you miserable. The wisdom that will help us to be free from birth, old age, sickness, and death created in this world. Knowledge can only help us earn money, find a great job, marry a beautiful wife, and live in an enormous house. The intellectual man is rich, but not happy. And the wise man is poor, but happy. The Buddha, when he was a crown prince, he learned all things from astronomy to fortune-telling, from mathematics to geography. He was always number one at every subject. But eventually, Buddha realized that intellectuals who learned in the world only brought suffering because of money, beauty, fame, and indulgence. Having a lot of money and beauty, misery would always follow. Having fame will bring enemies to oneself. So, eventually, his most precious treasure is wisdom. He was born under a tree. He got enlightened under a tree. And he died under a tree. As simple as he was, the world still honored him even after 2,600 years. While many kings created their own thrones of jewels for themselves and for their relatives, no one remembers them. And if they were to be remembered, they were remembered with negativity or words of resentment. So once again, during this Buddha's birthday season, even though we do not have a bathing ceremony, I send a message to understand more about the Buddha. Why did he give up everything? It is so that he can find happiness. His disciples were born without anything, and they created everything over their lifetime. In the end, eventually, we lose everything. Because of this non-stop greediness, hell is waiting for us. Where is hell? It is here and not anywhere else. Whoever is content with the present and knows enough is enough, then he is in the realm of happiness. For someone such as a king or the richest billionaire, Bill Gates, who is still greedy and not knowing when enough is enough, then he lives in mansions and flying on private jets, but he still has worries and miseries as the sentient beings in hell. Namo Sikmanui Buddha. This Buddha birthday, I have no disciples, no Buddha bathing ceremony, but I still send a clear message to my disciples to show them how to be happy and live as whom we are. They need to know how to let things go. Whatever the Buddha found and did, all of us should be able to do the same. Because the Buddha said that all sentient beings have a true Buddha nature. Unfortunately, we do not recognize our true Buddha nature, and we run after our worldly nature. What does it mean by following our worldly nature? It means we follow money, beauty, fame, and indulgence. Following our Buddha nature is following compassion, forgiveness, renunciation, and liberation. Namo Sikmuni Buddha. These words commemorate a painful event on Buddha's birthday in this world. We hope all sentient beings in this realm rely on the blessing of the Buddha to rediscover the path of blessing and happiness. Suffering or happiness are created by ourselves. Remember, our greatest enemies are ourselves. And the one who help us to be free from Samsara, to enter the Buddha realm, to Nirvana realm, and to all the Amitat Pure Land is us and not anyone else. Sincerely yours. I wish you a wonderful Buddha's birthday this season. To open your mind to wisdom. Look back at all Buddhist followers in the United States. Anyone who complains that he or she is suffering, then they are not Buddhist disciples. All Buddhist followers who are living in Vietnam, if you find yourself not miserable, even though your assets are low, you, in fact, have wisdom of the Buddha. Namo Sikmuni Buddha.